Good morning and welcome to this, the 18th meeting of the Public Petitions Committee in 2019. Can I ask everyone present to please turn their mobile phones and other devices to silent? We have received apologies today from Joanne Lamont. Alex Rowley is in attendance as Joanne's substitute. Welcome to the committee, Alex. And for agenda item 1, I ask Alex Rowley to indicate whether he has any relevant interests to declare.
Interest, Convener.
Thank you. So we will go into consideration of continued petitions, and for the first petition we have the next item on our agenda, is consideration of a continued petition PE 1600 on speed awareness courses lodged by John Chapman. The petition, which calls for the introduction of speed awareness courses, was last considered in February of this year. At that meeting, the committee agreed to take evidence from representatives of the multi-agency working group that is devising the necessary infrastructure and guidance to support the introduction of speed awareness courses. And I welcome Chief Superintendent Gary McEwen on behalf of the multi-agency working group to the meeting. You're very welcome. Thank you for coming in. We're just going to go straight into questions, if that's okay. So if I can take us back to July 2016 and Transport Scotland's written submission to this committee, and it stated that by the end of September 2016, Police Scotland will be able to provide an update on the progress that they have made in identifying all the steps required to introduce speed awareness courses and provide a steer on any identified barriers to implementation. And clearly this hasn't happened. So can you give us an explanation as to why?
Certainly, Chair, I can. Yes, so I'm Gary McEwen, the Commander of Criminal Justice Services Division, and I am the chairperson of the Road Traffic Diversionary Course Scottish Multi-Agency Steering Group, which is a mouthful in itself. But that group is represented by a number of key partners, being Crown Office, Scottish Courts, Scottish Government, Camera Safety Partnership, and obviously the police. And the purpose of that group is to explore the relevance and whether we as a joint partnership should recommend the introduction of speed awareness courses down south. So I've got a timeline here that I could quickly just talk you through, which would probably explain some of the apparent sort of time lapse and the delay. So in September of 2016, between then and February of 2017, there were various discussions that took place between Police Scotland Chief Constable and the Lord Advocate around the benefits or otherwise of speed awareness being introduced across the country. In March of 2017, agreement was reached or made by the Lord Advocate that we should look to begin to scope the benefits or disbenefits of speed awareness, because it's been on the go for a number of years down south, but actually there's not really been any clear and significant evaluations. So the Lord Advocate, I think, rightly asked for a scoping in principle. There was a 3-year study that had been ongoing with the Department of Transport down south. So it was a study that was looking back for 3 years around the benefits or disbenefits, and they were expected to publish on the 1st of August 2017. And what the Lord Advocate stipulated in the March was that we had to await the outcome of that Department of Transport report from down south. Unfortunately, however, that report was delayed significantly and actually was not published until the 15th of May 2018. So there was a 9-month delay in the Department of Transport for England and Wales publishing their report. Their report on the 15th of May, obviously me as a from a Police Scotland perspective, had a look at that, and the key findings were, I would say, not conclusive but very positive. And a couple of the key phrases was it was ascertained that participation in these courses had a larger impact in reducing speed reoffending than fixed penalties, which is currently the process we have in place up here. And however, they did say that there was no direct link to a reduction in road traffic accidents could be found, but it does appear as though it did positively impact on speed driver behaviour. So as a consequence of that report, we then Police Scotland submitted a further report to the Lord Advocate in September of last year, recommending that we be given approval in principle by the Lord Advocate to begin the implementation. We received confirmation of that in January of this year, and in March of this year we established formally the multi-agency working group. So there has been a number of months into years that have ran, but hopefully, Chair, that explains the delay. What is speed awareness? Speed awareness in Scotland currently we would give a condition of fixed penalty. So if somebody is caught speeding, they would be given the fixed penalty and 3 points on their licence. If it breached a certain threshold, then they would actually not be given the fixed penalty. There'd be a police report going directly to the Crown Office. What speed awareness does is gives the police the opportunity to divert an individual away from prosecution to a speed awareness course, as long as their speed does not breach a certain threshold. But for that to happen, for the police to be allowed to divert from prosecution, we need the Lord Advocate's approval for that, because they are, the Crown are responsible for prosecution policy, and we have to get their acceptance and agreement on that. So the working group now the purpose of that is to look through the intricacies of rolling out speed awareness, because on the face of it, it may seem pretty straightforward, but actually it's not. The examples is we will need a bespoke standalone ICT system. So Police Scotland have to implement an ICT system, which we are currently scoping, and I've put a bid in for capital funds, but it's £600,000 to get the ICT system to actually support speed awareness. So that bid is currently in with my executive, and obviously the capital funding programme is currently under negotiation with the SPA and the Scottish Government for next year. So that bid is in there, but there is no guarantee as yet that we will get that £600,000. We then have to establish a third-party provider. So it's quite straightforward down south, because each of the small or the forces have their own third-party provider. In Scotland, but it's been one national with geographical challenges to establish a third-party provider that can do speed awareness courses across the country will be challenging. In my procurement, people tell me it could take between 12 and 18 months to go through European tender, etc., to identify a third-party provider. So we need to confirm we're going to get the ICT, then we need to identify the third-party provider and go through that legislative negotiation. And then the other two areas which we can do in tandem is around policy guidance, process and training for operational staff. And that's just simply from a Police Scotland perspective. The other partners, the ICT will not just begin and end with us. It will have to connectivity with other partners, as well as they will have to change their processes. So we are supportive. The group is very much supportive of the implementation of speed awareness, because it does educate rather than penalise certain driver behaviour. But to implement it, we need to do it properly, and it will take a bit of time to do it.
Okay, thank you. David Torrance.
Good morning, Gary.
Good morning.
The petitioner is continuing to raise concerns about the lack of progress in this. Is this basically down just to trying to evaluate and get information about it? And as you mentioned earlier, Department of Transport and that being late, is that particularly down to that?
I mean, to be honest with you, that has been the biggest delay, through no fault of the Department of Transport, I'm absolutely sure. But we expected the report in August of 17, and we never got it till May of 18, and that did sort of delay us significantly. And then now, because of our understanding of the requirements, as I mentioned earlier, the requirement of an ICT system, that's a lot of money, so we need to at least put a bidding process to secure that funds, which is not guaranteed as yet. But once we get that ratified, I do still think we need to manage realistic expectations, and I do think it will be between 12 and 18 months from the point of hopefully receiving the money to actually implementing fully speed awareness. But if we do it right within those timescales, then hopefully that will last for decades to come.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Maurice Corey.
Thank you, Rena. Good morning, Chief Superintendent.
Good morning.
In relation to just follow on from David Torrance's question there, I'm looking at the financial implications, and you mentioned the £600,000 bid. Obviously got to go to Scottish Government and SPA as well. It's been implied in the work we've received and research that there is some holding back of that money or delay in getting that approved. I mean, are there any problems within the approval process that you're finding?
No, I don't know for certain yet. I will get the money. To be honest with you, we have bid for it, but as you can imagine, with Police Scotland and with all partners, there are a number of competing priorities for capital monies for next year. So that is there, and it is, or it does have the support of my supervisor, but it does have to go to an independent assessment with all the other competing priorities that will come. So there is no guarantee yet, but we hope to find out. There is a meeting the week after next, and there's a further meeting in December, at which point the force will notify people such as myself as to what the priorities and what the spend is going to be for next year. But I am confident that I will take receipt of the monies, but I'm not guaranteed as yet.
Therefore, I mean, with this delay, what's the implication and knock-on effect to, shall we say, road safety and your eyes that if you don't get this money in time?
So that's what I touched on from the Department of Transport paper. What they're saying is that they can't actually directly say that the introduction of speed awareness has significantly reduced road or improved road safety. The report is vague on that. They can't quite tie that down. But anecdotally, what we learn, or what we have learned, is that, you know, positively influencing driver behaviour should and does improve people's thought processes that are on the road. So to answer your question, until we get the money, until we get the ICT, and until as a partnership we have all the things in place, we'll continue with the current process, which is conditional offer, 3 points on the licence, and or a report going to the Crown for a court case if required.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Chief Super. At the beginning of the year, the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service confirmed that a multi-agency working group would, as I quote, will work together to devise the necessary infrastructure and guidance required to support the introduction of speed awareness courses in Scotland. You've touched on this in one of your early answers, but I wonder if you could maybe explain what infrastructure and guidance is required, and in doing so maybe give us a little bit of progress into what's been made in terms of devising this infrastructure and guidance.
So I touched on the policy guidance and process. So there is, under the group that I chair, we have 4 steering groups or subgroups to the steering group: communication and engagement, the course content and funding, the guidance, which kind of touching on, which is around the courses and the development of the Lord Advocate's guidelines and operational parameters, and also to assess the consequential potential impact of business levels for Crown, Police Scotland, Scottish Courts, and the road safety camera programme. Because what, you know, currently with the conditional offers, you know, we know the numbers of them, but if we're going to divert people from prosecution, the numbers in relation to conditional offers will reduce, and I expect a number of people will take up the opportunity of a course, because it is not mandatory. You know, if people are stopped and they have been caught speeding, they may choose not to take up the course and may actually choose just to pay the fine and take the 3 points. So to answer your question, we have 4 subgroups that are under my group, and each of the subgroups are chaired by one of the partners reporting in. To be honest, however, there hasn't been massive traction, because, you know, we need to confirm that we're getting the money to roll out the ICT system, because if we don't get the ICT system, then actually trying to roll out speed awareness will be very, very challenging. So that's the most important milestone, is over the next couple of months.
Ask a little supplementary and go off at a complete tangent, which is unlike me. If we're moving away from the standard fine and 3 points to the offer of a course, a speed awareness course. Is there a financial implication to that, positive or negative?
There may be for some agencies, not for Police Scotland, but for, and I don't know enough of the detail here, but you know, the conditional fixed penalty goes into the court, so there will be monies potentially that will be moved from the court towards paying for the diversionary courses. The courses down south, but again we have to obviously identify and go through that process of identifying the right course provider. Down south, the cost of the course is in and around the same cost of the fine, the £90. So there may be financial challenges for some partners as a consequence of the fines not going to the court service and actually going to pay for the courses for the external provider.
Just again, if the person that's caught speeding, do they still have to pay for the course?
Yes. So yeah. Okay. So that's their option, is to pay the fine or pay for the course. The benefits of the course clearly are that there is some education there. There is also benefits down south, and I would imagine would follow a similar model where it's then has positive traction for insurance companies, etc., because they're not getting 3 points. So you know, costs associated with insurance companies may prove beneficial to the car driver. But for me, the most important thing is actually getting them on the course and hopefully educating them in a positive way to positively change their driver behaviour.
Is there any sort of investigation being done around the fact that these people will not be going through sort of the judicial process? So there'll be a saving there. Is that reasonable to think?
No, we've not as yet anyway calculated any savings as a consequence of that. There will be some additional cost that I'm aware of around the back office, so albeit the ICT system is a one-off cost and there may be recurring for lifetime management, but we will require staff to input the data, etc., etc. But we're hoping that some of the staff currently that are doing other bits of middle office work, as I call it, can assist with this process once it's rolled out.
Thank you.
Okay. Alex Rowley.
Just a couple of points, I suppose. One is that, can you clarify what we're speaking about is that you would be given the choice of the fixed fine, or you could be given the choice of fixed fine or take up the course, but you're not saying that the fixed penalty, you would still get your 3 points, or would you?
No, so and it would be a threshold that hasn't been agreed as yet with the Lord Advocate, but down south, if you so let's say, and I am kind of going off piste here because I'm not a road traffic expert, but if you're caught speeding in a 30, it tends to be that up until about 39 there'd be no action, but beyond that, as it stands just now, you get a fixed penalty. With the speed awareness, what happens down south is between, say, and I am just giving an example, I'm not certain of this, but say 39 and 49, you would be given the option of, you can either get three points or a £90 fine, or you can take advantage of the course. If you go beyond 49, your driving is so erratic and so fast, then you would not be given the option of the course. You would be going straight to report to the Procurator Fiscal is up here, but the Crown Prosecution Service down south. So no, you either take the course and you don't get the points, or you pay the fine and get the points.
So I'll come to this question that's been set out here, but one of the issues, Convener, is that these questions are all about why this is taking so long. But in terms of what you're saying, Superintendent McEwen, if you don't get this funding in the next few weeks, then basically this is not really going to go anywhere. And from a petition committee point of view, well, this is my first meeting, I would assume that would not be something that this committee would be too happy about. In the olden days when we had 5 police, you know, there was a committee, a police committee, etc. Where would we go with this? If the funding isn't made available in the next few weeks, then this whole idea is not going to take off. So where in this Parliament would this committee suggest that we we take this matter up, given that I'm assuming this committee wants to see this happen. So I think that's a question that we need to resolve before we leave here. But can I also say that I attended a couple of years ago, well, I attended a number of years ago in Fife, there was Drive Safe, Stay Alive, and I then attended one in Stirling a few years ago, and I remember they handed the box of hankies round at the start of that, but there was no question that you came out of there thinking, you know, it was like a sort of shock and awe sort of thing. So there is evidence in the Stirling case. I remember them saying that the number of young people involved in accidents had fallen. Is that right? Aye.
Yeah, so again, I'm not head of road policing. Stuart Carroll would know the detail, but there are, so Safe Drive Stay Alive was one in Fife, and there are other similar, if not called the same, maybe slightly different, ongoing across Scotland, and they are targeted towards the young people. So they're not targeted towards those that are speeding, which is what this is about, but it is about early influencing or positively influencing the behaviours of young people when they get behind the wheel.
Yeah. And can you tell me, when is the multi-agency working group, or does it intend to report its conclusions to the Lord Advocate? And where else would it report to? I mean, this is quite a significant change in road policing if this was to go ahead. So where does all this come together, and where is it reported to? And back to the question, you know, where do we go if the money's not available?
Road safety, and I don't actually sit on it. This is where it's a wee bit muddled, but there is a road safety scrutiny board, and it may not be called that, but there is a board that is attended by the really senior partners across the country, and that is where the report will go to, and it will be for that group to support or otherwise the rollout of speed awareness. In relation to the funding, as I say, I'm hopeful that the funding will come. If the funding doesn't come, we then need to go back to the drawing board and see if there are any other alternative ICT solutions. But to be honest, we've looked at that, but looking at other ways to do it, whether it be going back to a sort of paper-based system, which is not ideal. So that will be the next steps.
Suggesting, convener, that, you know, this committee, if we think this needs to go ahead, we need to be able to flag up to the committee in this Parliament that deals with Police Scotland our support, but also our concerns around the funding, because this is almost like a hit or a miss. If you get the funding, it might happen. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Given that this is a significant change in road policing.
Yeah. Thank you. Brian Whittle, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, you're, by everything you said, you're advocating that an educational route for certain people speeding is a more beneficial route, especially around reoffending, or prevention of reoffending. I think the Department of Transport commissioned an impact evaluation and national speed awareness course, which concluded, as you are saying there, that speed awareness courses would have a better effect. Just wondered whether the multi-agency working group accept that, as you do, that the speed awareness course would be a useful tool in the prevention of reoffending.
Certainly all members that come to my group are overwhelmingly supportive of the principle of the speed awareness courses.
I think, really, if I could just a wee supplementary here, following on from where Alex Rowley has been taking this around what happens around funding. I just wanted to, are you clear, or is the working group clear, what the Scottish Government's policy is on the introduction of speed awareness courses?
Not directly. The information I had was that through the road safety framework of 2020, there was an action point in that road safety or speed awareness courses should be explored. And I'm paraphrasing there, but there is a line in there saying that they should be explored, but nothing more than that. There is no sort of direct instruction to roll out or implement speed awareness. It's for the multi-agency partners to explore the benefits or disbenefits of it.
So within that, though, was there, do you think, there was a general commitment from the Scottish Government to implement any policy that this multi-task force agency decided was the best way forward.
So, Transport Scotland sit on my group, and they are very supportive of speed awareness and the introduction of it, and they obviously report into or part of the Scottish Government. So they sit there and they are absolutely supportive of what we're trying to collectively do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to try and get a couple of things clear on the funding side. So it's £600,000, and it's a bid into Police Scotland's capital budget. Is that right?
Yes.
What other kind of things on the capital budget list would that be competing against?
So it could be cameras, so the personal cameras for the police officers. It could be for fleet, for vehicles, so the funding for fleet. There is a list which I have not seen, but I do know. I mean, there's a list of probably there'll be more than that, about 20 to 30 priorities, and these are the real priorities for policing and speed awareness is in that list, but they clearly cannot be all funded. So I do know that the executive and others have these meetings, one I think next week, but the most important one in December, to see what they can and cannot prioritise and what will be given the green light for next year.
So that decision will be made in December, and we'll be able to know then.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else got any questions? Alex?
Should we be able to write to the Justice Minister and flag this up? I mean, are we as a committee saying that we are supportive of this? And if we are, then we should be flagging it up someplace, because there is other budgets, road safety budgets and all the rest of it. I just think that if we're serious about this, we need to flag it up and have that discussion with those in authority who have the power to make this happen.
Any other comments or suggestions, Brian?
Yeah, I think for me, we do need to. I would quite like to write to the Scottish Government and just understand what its speed awareness, what its policy is on the introduction of speed awareness courses. It is going to come down to finance. It is going to come down to priorities. It's, you know, as we've said, we're competing against so many other things. We're competing against the speed camera infrastructure network. We're the fleet. You know, so it's certainly not a given. And I think that it would be really interesting to see what the Scottish Government's policy is on this. I would certainly write to them. I certainly be want to speak to or at least contact the Justice Secretary and ask him specifically on this topic.
We write directly to the Lord Advocate and ask him from his point of view when it's expected. So a bit of top-down pressure there, rightly to be rolled out.
Yep. So Scottish Government.
Justice Secretary.
And right, okay. When do you want the timings of this to happen? Because if we're waiting to see if the funding is going to be granted in December, are we going to let that play out, or are we going to write immediately? David, and then Brian, and then Alex.
Convener, I would like to actually wait and see if the funding's delivered in December, because if the funding's delivered, the programme's then going to take 18 months to go ahead. If it's not delivered, then we could put pressure on the government and on the Lord Advocate to say why is this not been given.
Brian?
I have to say, in general, I would most of the time I would agree with that. But I think in this particular instance, my concern was around the not understanding what the Scottish Government's policy is on this. So in that particular point, we can write to the Scottish Government to get their feeling on where they sit with this first. We don't need to wait till December to ask that question.
Okay.
Lord Advocate. Well, Lord Advocate. Yeah, we have to wait to see how it plays out. But I think I would like to understand from the Scottish Government what the position is on this.
And I think it's important just to establish where this fits within the wider road safety, because I'm not sure that just competing against those other areas is right if there is other road safety budgets and other budgets available. So from a government point of view, where is the sort of overall coherent approach to this? And I do say again, I think this is a significant change in road policing if we move from fines and fixed penalty points to education courses. That is a clear policy shift, one that if the evidence supports it, then good. But there is a more strategic issue here that I feel the government needs to be on top of, and if they're supporting it, they need to say, well, there is other funding routes, because no doubt every part of that capital budget, every bid for it will be a worthy bid. So let's look at this more strategically, I think, or the government needs to, or we need to understand either the government do support this and are willing to look at it more strategically or not.
Yep, Brian.
One thing, again, my tangential questions there was, first and foremost, this policy, if it's implemented, is around road safety and improving road safety. That's absolutely fundamental. But I think what would be quite interesting, if that's the case, what the financial implications of that in terms of capital cost, but what comes out the other end of that in terms of through the judicial, people not going through the judicial system. What the implications then are to the overall budget. So it's not just a police budget we should be talking about here. There are other budgets that are going to be impacted positively and negatively. So it's one of those things where to pay for the ICT system that's coming out of the police would come out of the police budget, but actually it's going to impact other budgets on either side of that. So I think again, I think it's a Scottish Government thing, looking at an impact assessment. Cost impact assessment would be quite, because it might not cost 600,000 in the end of the day. If there's money saved somewhere else, it might not be a £600,000 cost. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. So that's quite a substantial letter to the Scottish Government then to cover all the points that we've just listed there, and we will watch very closely and get feedback in December, and hopefully the bid is successful, so good luck with that. And I would like to now suspend the meeting to allow the witnesses to leave. Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Okay, welcome back. Now, today's first new petition for consideration is PE 1743 on amending the law to protect the rights of pre-1989 Scottish secure tenants, lodged by John Foster on behalf of Govan Community Council and others. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to amend the Rent Scotland Act 1984 to prevent disproportionate rent increases being set for Scottish secure tenants. Our briefing explains that from September 2002, all registered tenancies with social landlords, except for short assured tenancies, were automatically converted into Scottish secure tenancies by Section 11 of the Housing Scotland Act 2001. The determination of fair rent is governed by Section 48 of the Rent Scotland Act 1984, and according to our paper, rents are deemed fair through comparison with rents from comparable properties in the area. However, this does not differentiate between private and social housing rents, which can vary considerably. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? Alex?
Yeah, Pauline McNeill gives sense her apologies. She's been unfortunately delayed, but I mean, her view very much that she wanted to come and express to the committee was that she supports this petition and believes that the method used just now to calculate is giving out a false figure at the end of the day, because private rents are in many cases very high, and therefore that we should look towards setting this based on social rents, and that was a view she asked me to express to the committee convener, and it's one that I share.
Thank you. Anyone else?
There is a system, if I recall, within local authorities where a tenant can take their observations to the rent, we'll call it rent tribunal. There is something in place, and that's what's ringing in my head when I went through the papers yesterday. So it may be worth finding out, writing to COSLA, to know exactly what the policy is on that, because I mean, I've heard of people saying, well, I don't agree with that rent, particularly when they may be renewing a lease or something, or moving into a different form of housing. So I think we need to establish at local level what the tribunals or whatever they have set up, and also to write the Scottish Government and the First Tier Tribunal of Scotland to see what their views as well. But I think we need to drive it at a local level as well.
Okay.
So there is something there that I recall.
Okay. Anyone else? Brian?
No, I was going to reiterate what was said. Yeah, I think it's definitely writing to the Scottish Government and First Tier Tribunal for Scotland. I think that's our first port of call.
And a letter to COSLA as well to find out what happens at local level.
I undoubtedly they'll refer to that in the government.
So we'll write a letter to COSLA asking about local level issues. We'll write to the Scottish Government, and we'll also write to First Tier Tribunal for Scotland.
Can I just say something, Gavina, which follow up what I just said? There is, of course, now this question of registration of landlords. Okay, so there is an active thing going on at present, because I've heard of several cases coming to court about that, where landlords are not being registered, put in ridiculous rents, and tenants have got caught out. And I think that might be something what Pauline McNeill's been referring to. So it's another one to take up. Okay,
agreed with those actions? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Our next petition is PE 1744 on psychiatric service dogs in Scotland, lodged by Karen Mercedes Greer. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to recognise the valuable role psychiatric service dogs can play in helping people recover from trauma and mental ill health, and to fund a pilot programme of accredited psychiatric service dogs in Scotland. Our paper highlights a distinction between service dogs and therapy dogs. The former are trained to carry out specific practical tasks to make the lives of those with a disability easier. They are trained to work with one particular person, and their position as a companion is secondary. Therapy dogs are chosen for their temperament, the training is less exacting, and they can work with a range of people. And currently there appears to be no prescribed training of dogs, nor any legislation about the supply of such dogs. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action?
Can I just come in here, Chair? Paragraph 4, if I may say, is wrong. There is actually dogs, and I'm talking now from the Armed Forces veteran side. We do have a lot of that in place, particularly with an organisation called Bravehound, and I'd refer them to that. It's based at Erskine, in Bishopton and on the west coast. So there is a lot of study going on. There are actually 17 dogs that are currently in operation. So there is an active organisation currently in place, and I believe there are other ones in the UK that do this, where they do exactly what the petition is saying, is prevent problems happening with soldiers, veterans who have PTSD, and identify what the problems are, and they're given general training, they're monitored, they're properly looked after, they're monitored by Bravehound, they're funded through the Armed Forces Covenant funding, liable funding. So I would refer the petition to go and talk to Fiona McDonald, the Chief Exec of Bravehound, and see exactly what they do. There is a model sitting there in this country.
Brian and then David.
Certainly, you know, the petitioner's asking for a pilot programme to be instigated, and if there's one already going on, why I think it would be reasonable to write to them to see one, how it compares to what the petitioner's asking for, and two, if it's been going for 3 years, you would imagine they would have some sort of feedback on its success or otherwise. So I'd certainly be thinking of writing to them. Quite interested to hear what the Scottish Government again have to say in this particular instance.
David?
I'd agree with Brian about the Scottish Government, but there is ones in Fife in local areas. Because my next door, neighbour 3 doors down has got a retriever, and it's a therapy dog that goes out into communities and into hospital and things like that. So, and that's been trained. So there is projects going on across Scotland. So it'd be nice to find out what's happening.
Different areas, that's right.
Possibly might be slightly different what the petitioner is asking for. So I think that we need to try and get a clearer picture of what's going on. So I would agree. I think it's really interesting that Bravehound. Yeah. I would really like to know, you know, as Brian said, you know,
if they've been not
operating for 3 years, you know, what their outcomes have been, and if that's the sort of thing that we're looking at, could it be extended, you know, not just for veterans and into other areas.
I mean, they do have positive proof of preventing suicide.
Okay. Any other organisations, animal organisations that we could be writing to?
The other one is Horses for Forces, which is in the borders, but that's another one. But you're not keeping a horse in your home. You actually go to them and you go through various courses. And there's also Horseback UK up in Aberdeenshire. So there is that again. That's a question of riding horses as compared to working with horses, which is Horses for Forces. So I think there's a plethora of these.
Just want to stick with dogs?
Yeah, I'm just saying, but there's a link to animals.
Absolutely. So. I mean, there are, you know, Assistance Dogs UK, the International Guide Dog Federation, the Society for Companion Animal Studies, Dogs for Good, Dogs for Depression, Psychiatric Assistance Dogs Foundation, and also the Mental Health Foundation. I think would be good to get their overview on. Are we agreed on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot.
There are a lot of organisations.
One thing that does strike me is there are a lot of organisations.
I mean, for example, is one that they use and it works very successfully.
Yeah.
Why they're not working together would be my next question. But there you go. That's for another day.
I think it would be interesting to find out just what they all do. Yeah. They might do slightly different things and reach out to different people. So, we agreed on those actions?
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Our next petition is PE 1745 on statutory rights for families to request a fatal accident inquiry lodged by James Jones. Now, this petition calls on the Scottish Government to ensure that families have a statutory right to request a fatal accident inquiry. A fatal accident inquiry can either be mandatory, typically where someone dies in legal custody, or in an accident related to their work, or discretionary, where a death is sudden, suspicious, unexplained, or gives rise to serious public concern. The Lord Advocate, under certain circumstances, can use their discretion to hold or not hold a fatal accident inquiry. Legislation contains no formal right of appeal against a decision by the Lord Advocate in relation to an inquiry. However, it is notionally possible to challenge a decision using a legal process called judicial review. During parliamentary scrutiny of the Inquiries into Fatal Accidents and Sudden Deaths, etc. Scotland Act 2016, the Law Society of Scotland commented that family members could have the right to seek a fatal accident inquiry. The right proposed does not appear to be absolute. Instead, a sheriff would decide whether the request would proceed. Do members have comments or suggestions for action on this one? Brian?
Yeah, I'm quite sympathetic to this, I have to say. I'm doing quite a little bit around adverse event reviews, which is very specifically around accidents and problems in hospital. It's from my understanding, one, it's not consistent across the country. And the Crown Office doesn't automatically investigate. I'm pretty sure they do down south. So we're quite interested to see the difference of approach between, because that's something we can go to. It does worry me that there's no redress. Or there doesn't seem to be a redress for families in this particular circumstance who are looking for an answer. So I'm certainly very interested in, I know the government are doing some work just now around adverse event reviews, which is not specifically what's being asked for here, but it sits within that sort of remit. I'd be interested to see what the government's views are on this specifically. And I would also quite like to understand from the Crown Office, and probably Procurator Fiscal, maybe even the Law Society, what their views on this action is called for. And I think, I would probably ask Spice if we could do a little comparison with what happens down south compared to what happens up here, because there certainly is a difference in approach. Not saying one's right or one's wrong, but it'd be interesting to see how that compares.
Okay. Morris?
Looking at paragraph 31 on page 3, the Scottish Parliament action, I think we see a number of petitions that have come forward since 2004, sorry. December 2000. It would be worth if Spice maybe summarise the sort of conclusions from those, because I think that'd be very helpful, convener, to see what has been done, what has been raised from that. I think that historical information would be useful.
Okay. Anyone else? No? So if we could get those extra pieces of information about the results of the other petitions and also what happens elsewhere in the UK, right to stakeholders, Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal and Law Society? Yeah. Everyone agreed on that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. The next petition is PE 1746 on the creation of a Scottish space non-departmental public body lodged by Andrew Paliwoda. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to create a non-departmental public body with responsibility for space technology and to work in partnership with other relevant organisations to ensure Scotland's space sector potential is fulfilled. According to our paper, Scotland has a growing space sector, which includes a number of high-tech, high-skill, as well as research and development businesses. The space industry in Scotland has over 130 companies with 7,600 employees backed by strong relationships with researchers in Scotland's universities. And nearly a fifth of all jobs in the UK space sector are based in Scotland. As the creation of a non-departmental public body, or NDPB, is the main action called for in the petition, our paper makes the distinction between executive and advisory NDPBs. An executive body carries out administrative, commercial, executive or regulatory functions on behalf of the government and is normally established by statute. An advisory body provides expert advice to ministers and others or input into the policy-making process in relation to a particular subject and typically do not require legislation. So do we have comments and suggestions for action? David?
Thank you, Convener. I think we should write to the Scottish Government asking its views on what the petition's calling for.
think as is highlighted in the paper, Scotland actually is particularly strong in sort of space exploration, especially in the west of Scotland. Funny enough, Glasgow's particularly good, and I think also the development of spaceports. I have to mention Prestwick here, and the development of the around that space, around Prestwick, and the investment that's now going into Prestwick through the Ayrshire growth deal as well. That can only grow. So I think it's a very important petition here in terms of making sure that we do maximise the potential here, because that's certainly an area that's going to grow and grow. I agree with David Torrance. We should write to the Scottish Government to see what its views. But there are lots of other key stakeholders in this area that we could write to. I think it's Scottish Enterprise and Space Network Scotland. Who knew they existed? UK Space Agency. I see this as Highland Islands Enterprise Office, because there's now a spaceport, particularly looking to go in there. UK Industrial Strategy would be a really interesting one to go after as well. And anything else you could think of?
Survey.
Yep.
Is this an area that they're looking at?
Yep.
Because I think some are.
Specifically, there's about 80 million specifically going into Prestwick Airport, and it's around the development of that as a spaceport, which will link into all the manufacturers, the space manufacturers in Glasgow, and there's a lot of engineering works around Prestwick as well that will benefit from that too. So it's certainly a sector we should be going after.
I think, Chair, if I may say also, is there a certain, I think it would be worth writing to the local authorities that are actually got a possibility of having a spaceport. Caithness, Sutherland, where else? Argyll and Bute and Ayrshire, North Ayrshire. Oh, sorry, Ayrshire. The three of them. Okay. The ones that I think have been identified.
Yeah.
You probably know. Which comes back to the region now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in this whole industry, and therefore it's worth looking at this and seeing how best to proceed to harness the potential.
Just be aware of where the businesses involved in space exploration are, and a lot of them are in Glasgow. So when we're looking at maybe where the spaceports are going to be placed, Glasgow is actually a hub for this sort of technology.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, it does cover the whole of Scotland. It would be remiss of me not to mention the Sutherland Space Hub, obviously. Thank you very much. I mean, given that, you know, the sector is growing at such a pace, we could be firing off letters left, right and centre, but we have to remember, you know, the point of the petition is, you know, the creation of this body. So certainly Scottish Government and the local authorities that are currently involved in the creation of these spaceports, which I believe there are several, and the other stakeholders that Brian Whittle mentioned. I'm not going to repeat them all because you did it so well, but we have a note of those. So is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Our next petition is PE 1747 on adequate funding to support children with additional support needs in all Scottish schools, lodged by Alison Thompson. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to provide adequate funding to support children with additional support needs in all Scottish schools, including primary, secondary and special schools. The majority of funding for school education comes from the Scottish Government through local authority budget settlements. In addition to this, there is the Attainment Scotland Fund, which provides direct funding of £10.5 million to support learning provision for children and young people with complex additional support needs, and £15 million to support learners with additional support needs. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? Brian?
Yeah, I think probably all of us have been approached in our surgeries and have picked up cases where the sort of special needs and special support services in schools haven't actually met the needs. I think all of us would recognise that. I think the fact that it's a local authority decision in terms of how they spend the budget makes this one quite a difficult one to address, because it's the Scottish Government do not dictate to local authorities how they spend the budget. So I think it's a particularly difficult one to address, but it would be, I do think I would like to understand from, I think COSLA definitely, or one in Enable Scotland and Education Scotland, I think would be ones you would like to write to get their views on this. But I think, you know, we know what's going to come back from this is that you know, budgets are tight, and as I say, it's a local authority decision on how they spend their budgets.
Any other comments, David?
I agree with Brian there. That's a decision that's going to come back. It's the local authority decides where their budget goes. So no, we've still got a right to COSLA in these groups.
Yes, thanks. I mean, I think one of the problems, I agree what Brian and David have said there, it's a cause and effect situation here. We are seeing an increase in cases now for children having learning support needs. I must declare into my wife is actually an SEN and is very much involved in the sector in Argyll and Bute. And I also know from the armed forces sector is that we are seeing more children requiring learning support from particularly in our area, the Royal Navy element, but don't get me wrong, it's because of families being, you know, sort of parents being away at sea or away in operations, things like that. So I think we need to make the government aware it's not something that's going to go, I think, down, it's going to go probably up. And therefore there needs to be more resources put in or consideration how they might replan ASNs and classroom assistance, because that was certainly a very good move originally. So any consideration and cutbacks, I think if the government can persuade local authorities not to tackle that sector, I would think be enormously grateful. There's also another element to this. The other element of this is obviously when we talk about mainstreaming, there are other issues there. And partly, if I may say, comes from parents understandably wanting the best for their child, but also sometimes not accepting there is an issue with their children or their child who actually needs that little bit extra help. And I see it sometimes, you know, in schools in my area where a child really should be in another organisation or another class or another school. And I have a case in point with one of my cases actually at the moment, and the child is thriving. I spoke to the mother the other day because he got moved to a special school which actually was brilliant, and there was a push from both parent and indeed from the system, the sort of collective national system, to mainstream. And I think we have to be very, very careful, and the more we push that, the more we're going to have issues. So I think we need to get GERFEC, which comes back to GERFEC, literally put it into place. So I think we have to take that whole issue up.
Alex?
Yeah, there is that issue that at the end of the day, the school and the parents and the pupils are the people who should be able to reach decisions on what's best for the children. I was educated in a period where mainstreaming was not the norm, quite the reverse. But it's interesting if you look at the Section 15 of the 2000 Act, where it says that mainstreaming should be the presumption unless, and it says, for example, would result in unreasonable public expenditure being incurred when it would not ordinarily be incurred. But the truth is that where you have children with learning difficulties, children with behavioural issues, then if you don't put the extra resource in and the extra support in, then one of these other criteria where it would be incompatible with the provision of efficient education for children with whom the child would be educated comes into play. And we've all seen that because we've had parents come to us to say their kids are not getting enough support. We've had parents come to us, I'm sure, I certainly have over the years, to say that where there is a kid with behavioural problems or whatever special education needs, that the disruption to the other kids is interfering with their education. So the right, given that this is legislation, it's not simply to say it's just down to local authorities. I think there is a role, given that this is in legislation, for government, but I think the right step would be in the first instance to have this discussion with COSLA and see what the local authority position on this is before coming back and deciding where it actually goes. But as I say, it's not just a local authority issue. This is a government issue, given that the legislation states the presumption of mainstreaming.
Brian?
Also, I would add to that, having the now, being a list MSP as I am, I work across several local authorities, and the difference in approach from one authority to the next authority is stark. And I have constituents who move house to get into the next the adjacent authority so they can access services. So that sort of disparity of delivery of the services, I think, you know, is without question is a big issue, and it is something, you know, that probably the government do wrestle with. And as Alex Riley says, there is legislation there, and although I certainly don't think we should be prescriptive with local authority spend, there has to be some sort of framework that allows that disparity to close, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Chair, I think, come back to my point, I'm probably looking at the more sort of macro issue. Social media is definitely playing an effect now as the kids, even younger children at 4 or 5, peer group pressure, you know, not being on the mobile, all this. And there's something I'm getting feedback from teachers and head teachers is some issues which is obviously down to parents in the home and allowing the child to have a mobile phone or not, or get on to social media. So I think it's a bigger problem, and that's why I come back to national government, is there needs to be a rethink at that level in relation to the funding, because, you know, we're in another area where we really are in an issue here. And I have 2 cases of kids where actually it's involved the parent versus the kid in court over their behaviour from the effects of social media and game stations and goodness knows what.
I think it's important to get those views, because I think, as Brian says, there's a huge difference over local authorities. I have an excellent campus in my constituency. Thank you to Fife Council, and Alex was one of the people who was involved in that, who do absolutely fantastic work, integrated with the whole school, high school. So I think we've got to get opinions of Cosler.
Okay. I mean, it is worth stating that the Education and Skills Committee have done a fair bit of work on this, and they are keeping a watching brief on it. So we should keep an eye on what they're doing as well. I mean, you're absolutely right. It does seem that there are disparities between local authorities, and certainly not everybody has the luxury of being able to move into another local authority to get the assistance that they believe that they need. Will we write to the Scottish Government seeking views on what's contained in the petition? COSLA obviously has been mentioned. Possibly Education Scotland and Enable Scotland as well. Yeah. Agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you everybody. Moving on to the next petition, and I'd like to welcome Fulton McGregor, MSP, to the committee. Good morning. Morning. The next petition for consideration is PE 1748 on providing protection for small communities in Scottish planning policy, lodged by Isabel Kelly on behalf of Gartcosh Tenants and Residents Association. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to provide specific provision within the National Planning Framework 3, NPF 3, and the Scottish Planning Policy for Small Communities, which provides for a pre-development community asset and infrastructure audit when an area is identified as being able to accommodate large-scale urban growth, and protects areas considered by its community to be high-value scenic assets and at risk of the coalescence of communities. The Scottish Government is currently leading a planning reform programme, with the legislative change required to support this programme set out in the Planning Scotland Act 2019, which received royal assent this summer. The Act includes several provisions relating to the MPF. However, the specific suggestions made by the petitioners were not raised during the planning reform process or development of the Planning Scotland Act. Do members have any comments or suggestions? Fulton, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Convener. Would it be okay to make a few remarks, up to a few minutes? Would that be all right? Thanks very much. I'd like to thank you and the committee for allowing me time to speak in this petition. I should say as well, thanks to my colleagues in Equalities and Human Rights Committee, where I've just came from, and with people's indulgence, I'll be leaving after the consideration of this committee to return there. And I'd also obviously like to place on record my thanks to Isabel Kelly on behalf of the Gartcosh Tenants and Residents Association, Liz Ward and others for bringing this petition to the Parliament. And as Mrs Kelly said in her petition, she has indeed had several discussions with myself as planning applications in her area of Gartcosh have progressed, and I know that these have also taken place likewise with local councillor Greg Lennon, who I'm sure the committee would wish me to mention for his hard work also highlighting this issue. Sorry, is that?
Can you just make sure that your microphone's working?
It's okay? Yeah. Maybe it wasn't facing me, is
There's
that
just
better?
no light on it. It is on, it's fine. Okay, thanks. Sorry to interrupt there.
No bother, thanks. Convener, I'm sure that no one here will argue against the need for house building. With a growing population, with 500,000 new homes in Scotland to be built over the next 10 to 15 years. And I think that this Scottish Government has made impressive progress in this area. However, I do think that very few will deny the desirability of more rural locations within the Central Belt, where my constituency is, to both developers and those seeking to purchase new homes. And indeed, just a few months ago, I lodged a motion here in the Parliament celebrating the results of a recent study which found that Glenboig was the 5th healthiest place to live in the UK, perhaps showing that desirability. And I'm certain that the advantages of village living attractive to the existing communities are similarly attractive to those seeking to become part of those expanding communities. However, as the petition states, this expansion could in time eliminate almost entirely these advantages: a decimation of green space, a loss of sense of community, infrastructures unable to cope with the rates of expansion, and the inevitable coalescence of distinct village communities into part of the mass commuter belt. These are all the issues that I think that the petition is trying to bring to the fore. At this point, Convener, it may be appropriate for me to describe the geographical makeup of my constituency for members' benefits. Coatbridge in Christton, the largest part of my constituency, perhaps around about 2/3, is Coatbridge, a typical Lanarkshire post-industrial large urban town, very much in need of new housing actually and development on some of its brownfield sites. The remaining 1/3 compromises of a number of small towns and villages to the north of Coatbridge: Steps, Muirhead, Christton, Moodiesburn, Glenboig, and of course Gartcosh that we're discussing today, collectively referred to as the Northern Corridor and encompassed by the Christton part of the constituency name. And throughout the Northern Corridor, every one of these very unique and often post-industrial ex-coal mining small communities have witnessed extensive development. 2 more large-scale proposals actually I heard more about these just in the last week in both Gartcosh and in Steps. And these are leading to a loss of asset in terms of green space, woodland, wider natural environment, transport difficulties, rapidly increasing populations, and this is all left schools alarmingly over capacity and health services struggling to cope. And the petitioners here today and others will know that these are issues that I've certainly taken up with some degree of success in terms of, for example, a new health centre being designed for the Northern Corridor, although that has been long overdue. These scenarios are not unique to Gartcosh or indeed my constituency. I know they are replicated throughout the Northern Corridor, for example, and I've had many discussions with community groups and individual constituents with the issues raised in this petition. I'd like to state that I met recently with the Save the Steps Greenbelt campaign, a similar campaign to that of the Gartcosh tenants and residents. They've campaigned vigorously and continue to do so against the development on Greenbelt and fight to protect the village community. And I think it's also worthwhile me paying particular tribute to Frank and Alice Morton, Ken Maxwell and the others who have campaigned so hard. Indeed, I'm currently, from the last meeting with them, currently pulling together a round table type event to discuss this issue for the group, and I'm hoping that today's consideration of this petition can perhaps form part of the government's eventual thinking on this issue. As I said earlier, Convener, nobody's arguing against development. I would be one of the last people to do so, and I've already said the need in the large urban part of my constituency. However, there is a feeling that development is being imposed on these smaller communities where it's attractive to developers with little to no prior consultation. And I know that the government and the Minister, who I've spoken to about this before, are trying to address this issue and trying to do it through the provisions of the planning, the bill that just went through that you referred to. But the voices of those living and invested in local communities are not being heard, and that's why this petition has garnered traction. But I just want to apologise for my voice. I've got the cold that I think everybody's got that's going around. But the specific issues raised in this petition, as you said, Convener, were not considered during the scrutiny of the planning bill, nor during the planning reform process. And given that the government is doing extensive work in this area, it seems it is something there should be a focus on. I would recommend to the committee, for what it's worth, keeping this petition open and asking a response from the Scottish Government on the issues raised in it, and also maybe from other stakeholders. And I would ask that the Scottish Government are asked to consider, going back to my earlier comments about a round table, if they would consider facilitating that, or some sort of discussion where communities across Scotland, including those in my community steps, Gartcosh and others, can find common ground, have their concerns heard, and these communities, MSPs of all parties, can get round the table to try and find that ground between the desperate need for new housing and minimising the impact on unique and small communities such as Gartcosh. And I'll leave it at that just now, Convener. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And Alex Riley?
Yeah, I would be supportive of this. Where I would disagree with Fulton is that I certainly put amendments into the planning bill to try and address some of these issues, as did others. There is absolutely a need for communities to have more say and to be able to plan around assets, infrastructure, etc. So I would support this and look forward to hearing what the Minister on Planning has to say about that.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'm actually quite supportive of this as well. I think that when you look at the development of new housing, I often think that when you look at those new housing, how they use open space, how we develop, local assets, how we give access to things like to shopping, to play parks, I think is always often secondary. And it reminds me in Health and Sport Committee we are doing a study just now around primary care, and we went out to the communities and asked them to plan their own. We gave them a blank bit of paper and all the wee sticky bits and said plan your town. And it's amazing how when you ask the community to do that, how much open space, where they want the community assets to be, and I think we should be much more cognizant of local communities and their wishes in terms of what they want their communities to look like. So I'm really supportive of this. I think it's a very, very worthwhile petition. I definitely do agree that we should be, as Fulton McGregor said, speaking to the Scottish Government to seek their views. And I know they are, as Fulton said, they're already doing work in this area. But it's certainly going to be about town planning. I think we should be writing to town planners and see what are the rules in terms of when we're building these. To me, it's like concrete jungles. Where are the local community assets within that? What considerations given to those who already live in that area? So I would be very supportive of suggestions that Fulton McGregor has given.
Morris?
Yes, thanks. I mean, certainly I agree with all that's said, and fair enough, I had looked at the Gartcosh one that's been looked at, and one of the points I raised was the amount of amenities that weren't there that they should have, and it's rather condensed, the housing, and it has also happened in my area, in Eastern Bartonshire, over towards Bishop Briggs. One of the things I know from my experience as a councillor is how important it is that any local development plan that's drawn up is actually very, very clearly cognizant of the views of the local community, and therefore the local planning partnership consultations are very, very important, because that's where you get the input on all the local nuances that go on. So I would be very much in favour of getting COSLA on board on this and communicating with them the policies, and also in relation to the North Lanarkshire Council area, is that right? Yeah. Getting really to maybe write directly to them as well as to their views if we're taking this particular petition, which I think I certainly do have a lot of sympathy with and empathy with, because it is a classic example of balance on healthy living. And we've only got to go to Glasgow way back when we built the high-rise blocks, and what have they done? They've demolished a lot of them. Why? Because we had to curate our communities again. And I think that's so important. So let's learn the history lessons. So yeah, and when we're talking at in Isabel Kelly's petition, it talks about, in other words, prevent coalescence of communities with a mechanism for small communities to halt development if master plan is not creating a sustainable community. And that's my point, is the LDP needs to be built on proper solid ground that reflects the demands of the community, whilst we still need to house our people.
Okay. So we'll write to the Scottish Government, we'll write to COSLA to ask about the local development plans, write to the local authority involved, the Royal Town Planning Institute, Brian, Built Environment Forum Scotland, and I think Scotland's Towns Partnerships as well. We could letters off to all of those. I would like to thank Philip McGregor again for coming in and providing us with some very useful background, so thank you very much for that. Our next petition is PE 1750 on the independent monitoring of satellite tags fitted to raptors, lodged by Alex Hogg on behalf of Scottish Gamekeepers Association. This petition calls on the Scottish Government to introduce independent monitoring of satellite tags fitted to raptor species to assist the police and courts in potential wildlife crime cases and to provide data transparency. The use of satellite transmitters or tags are used to monitor the movements of many birds of prey in Scotland, with much of this work being carried out in the voluntary sector. The Scottish Government has published a collection of evidence protocol for incidents of raptor crime, which provides guidance for people involved in satellite tracking of raptors, including in what circumstances to contact the police, what information to provide, and in what circumstances incidents should be publicised. The petitioner argues that there are issues with the lack of transparency around how satellite tag data is collected and shared, and the variability in technology and practices, resulting in challenges when data is sought to be used as evidence of wildlife crime. The petitioner is advocating for satellite tags to be monitored by government or a government-approved body, which could provide the police with instant data access and independent resources to interpret the data. Do we have any comments or suggestions for action? Brian?
This isn't the first time that a petition like this has come through the Petitions Committee. We had one around the protection of raptors, and the issue comes down to the fact that any crime committed against raptors needs to be done in very, very rural settings, and therefore very, very difficult to gather evidence, whether that be through shooting or poisoning or whatever. I think it's a very worthwhile one, obviously, but I think my worry is that it comes down to exactly the same issues we had in the last petition, is how do we police this? So I think in this instance, I think we should be writing to there's quite a number of stakeholders, you know, the RSPB Scotland, for example. I think there's also Raptor Persecution UK. You've got obviously Police Scotland, to see what their view on this is. British Association for Shooting and Conservation, Scottish Land and Estates, SNH. You know, there's Scottish Raptor Study Group. There's loads of them, and we can write to them and see what they say. But my concern would be that how do we implement, you know, justice in this situation?
Does the Environment and Climate Change Committee have the brief for looking at wildlife crime, and that's where wildlife crime reports go to? And I just wonder if actually that committee.
That's where we sent the last one.
And what did they do?
That's what we sent the last one. We gathered evidence and passed that on to that committee, and I think, you know, I don't want to preempt this, but I would say we're going to gather evidence here, and then we're going to go onto that committee. We're going to move on to that committee because they're doing a lot more in-depth study in this area. But it's certainly something we should pursue just now.
Morris?
Again, we've got these petitions, and Brian, I know that one well because we discussed it when I was first on the Petitions Committee. And I think, again, we should ask Spice to maybe give a summation of those two petitions, 1705 and 1615, as to where that got to in relation to the committee, the ECLR. as well as obviously the outcomes of those petitions and where they got to. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and then we can put that information together with what Brian says is writing to the other stakeholders. I think that's what I'm saying, is gathering that information.
I did see recently that they said that a golden eagle had went missing in Scotland, and really the level of wildlife crime is got to be an issue. We maybe don't have the answer, but given that this petition is suggesting specifically doing something, then. But you're saying this has already happened, Brian? No?
Well, I'm just, in fact, the evidence we took, what, 2-3 weeks ago from around gamekeepers and the requirement that we were cutting down in the number of gamekeepers we have out there, all has an impact on this petition here. There's a lot of interconnecting things here, which is why I think being right to the Scottish National Heritage and the Gamekeepers Association, etc., will gather that info, but they're going to come back and go, we need more people to police it at a time when we're cutting it back.
I'm mindful that, given that we did have this come up very recently and it was referred to the Eclair Committee, just to refer this on as well. David?
You convener. I think if we've already done the work on it, and if another committee is doing work on it, why do duplication? Just pass it on and let them get on with it.
If you're happy with that, I would agree with that, because there's no point reinventing the wheel.
I think it's the best place for it to go.
Yeah.
If they're already doing the work on it. And I mean, they've been doing work on it as recently as March 19, so. Agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. The next petition I am going to declare an interest in because it has been brought forward. The petitioner is actually a member of my staff team, so I won't take any part of the discussion, and I'll leave that to other members. It's PE 1751 on Create No Wild Camp Zones in Scotland, lodged by Kirstine Curry. The petition is calling on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to create legislation to enable local authorities to create no wild camp zones in Scotland. Our briefing paper explains that wild camping involves pitching a portable shelter for 1 or 2 nights on unenclosed land, not using a formal managed campsite. The briefing paper also states that with the development of tourist routes such as the North Coast 500, as well as increasingly cheap tents and camping equipment, the prevalence of irresponsible camping appears to be increasing. Section 12 of the Land Reform Scotland Act 2003 provides powers for local authorities to make bylaws providing for the preservation of public order and safety, the prevention of damage, the prevention of nuisance or danger, and the conservation or enhancement of natural or cultural heritage. National Park authorities also have similar powers to make bylaws under Schedule 2 of the National Parks Scotland Act 2000. So does anyone have comments or suggestions for action, please? Brian.
This is an interesting one, actually. You know, I think if you look on the face of it, the idea of people being able to just pitch up anywhere they like, and you would suggest was something you would want to look at. I think it does clash though with the whole idea of the right to roam that we have in Scotland, and what the petition's really asking for is to give powers to local authorities. I suppose in that respect, I would be fairly supportive of that. I can see where all the problems are going to come, or potential problems are going to come with this. But I would be interested to see from the Scottish Government what their perspective on this is, especially around the right. We have the right to roam in Scotland. That is a law. So how does that clash with that? So I'd be quite interested to see what the Scottish Government's position was in that, because on the face of it, I can see what the petitioner's trying to do here.
Yeah, I think if we follow up what you've said and write to the appropriate people and get some information back, then take it for there.
Can I? Yes. Can I also? Yes. If certainly I would be acting to the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. That's right in my area. Actually, I know quite a lot about it. We had an awful problem in trying to get this wild camping situation sorted, and in fact affected the bylaws, and it has actually been quite successful. Of course, it has created a problem with Ramblers Scotland and Mountaineering Council of Scotland, but in the main, it's accepted as a way of managing the issue we had, and we still have from time to time. So I certainly would get some experiential research from them as how it's worked out. Since they've had it in place, because it was appalling what was happening, and it had to be gripped. So I'm not on the board or anything. I'm just simply the local MSP, or rather regional. So I would say it has come with some success, and I think it might be worth looking at the results of that so far and calling on the Chief Exec to send us an update.
To the National Parks Authority, actually,
to the one that's happened, yeah. Because this brings in Ramblers and is also as council and also Mountaineering. Sorry, Ramblers Scotland Mountaineering Council.
It's identifying specific areas, so Highland region, Argyll and Bute.
Yeah.
You know, it's identifying those areas have specific issues, so it'd be worth checking with them as well, I think.
I agree. Yeah. Sorry, like Cairngorm National Park, another one.
Okay, so we will write to the Scottish Government, we'll write to the National Park authorities. I think we should probably write to North Coast 500, given that that's specifically mentioned in our briefing pack. It was mentioned Mountaineering Scotland, Ramblers Scotland, probably also Parks Watch as well. And the appropriate local authorities that are involved in, Morris?
Yes, can I suggest that we might write to the Lake District Authority, Park Authority, because they've been going for many, many years, and I know that Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park took some references from them, so as an authority. So who've had a lot of experience. I think it'd be quite an interesting one if you wrote to them, and just because that would give us a nice. This is going back several years, and how they got over that.
Okay. Everyone agreed with those actions?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. The final new petition for consideration today is petition PE 1752 on management and time recording systems in the Scottish Government, lodged by Bill Alexander. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to introduce suitable workforce management and time recording systems to monitor the work activities of civil servants to ensure that reasonable standards of efficiency and value for money are being met. In our briefing for this petition, the current management systems and policies used by the Scottish Government are outlined, as well as how tasks are managed by government staff. The briefing also confirms that Audit Scotland employees are required to complete timesheets showing how long they have spent on various tasks, but there do not appear to be any documents in the public domain showing how Audit Scotland staff spend their time, nor how efficient they are. The briefing goes on to outline the challenges of measuring the efficiency of an organisation such as the Scottish Government through the action called for in the petition. Do members have comments or suggestions? Morris.
Close the petition. I think it's an operational matter, and I don't see any benefit in pursuing it.
Yeah, I think to me it looks like there's I don't want to put words in the petitioner's mouth, but there seems to be a bit of personal experience here that particularly has excited this petition. I understand where they're trying to go with this, but I think it will be difficult to achieve this in practice. I think that's the key thing here. It's not necessarily that the petition is not on a worthwhile basis. It's because actually looking at the outcomes that we could get, I think would be very, very difficult to actually get to where they need to get to.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm not sure this is the way to go about this. I think people can rightly ask politicians if government is efficient and effective, and I think there are ways for politicians and others to be asking those questions, but I'm not sure this is the right way to do it, and I'm not sure the trade unions who represent civil servants would be too happy if we went down this route. But you know, it is right that politicians at a government level can hold the government to account for the effectiveness and efficiency of government services, but this is not the way to do that.
David?
I'm in agreement if Alec, politicians could ask any government department questions and how efficient they are, so I think it's up to us to have a key role of scrutiny there, and I'm quite happy to close the petition.
Agreed? Okay, so we thank the petitioner, but we are agreed to close the petition under Standing Order Rule 15.7 on the basis, as Brian said, that the action called for in the petition is considered difficult to achieve in practice. And that's us. Thank you very much, and I close this meeting.